Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I've got a really great opportunity today to interview Ryan Guina. And so, for those that don't know me, my name is Patrick Weinert. I'm the host of the Money Mission Live. And today we're going to talk to Ryan Guina. And Ryan is somebody that I've always wanted to have a discussion with about personal finance. So let me give you a little bit of background on Ryan. Ryan is a Air Force veteran, so he was active duty Air Force for over 6 years. He actually was from the C-130 community, so he got out, and then he spent a little bit of time outside the service, and then came back into the Air National Guard some years later. But during the time, both in his career and in the time that he was not in the military, Ryan has been a very big name in personal finance, particularly personal finance for both active duty military and veterans. And for those that don't know, Ryan has really two organizations, websites. One is called Cash Money Life. The second is the Military Wallet. And both of them are really big in personal finance. They're big on sharing really valuable information to their respective audiences on ways to save money, ways to use resources to your advantage in order to really get ahead in your personal finances. And that could be for whatever your financial goals are. So what I'm really excited to do is just start off today by saying, Ryan, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here. It's a real pleasure to have you. And I really look forward to this next, hour, however long we're going to be able to have you to, just discuss, what's going on in the world of personal finance today, especially for military, maybe a little bit about you, and then ways that you might be able to help people viewing today. So it's great to have you, Ryan.
Oh, thanks, Patrick. Thanks for
Yeah,
the warm welcome and all the kind words. And I'm happy to be here.
yeah. And I also want to say, I see Michelle, you're in watching right now, so thanks for joining us. I also saw Dana made a few comments, so Dana, it's good to see you too. Um, and I wanted to start out actually. I got a few more comments here coming in from viewers, but I wanted to start out actually by saying, so Ryan, again, Ryan's somebody that I've followed for a while now, and for those that don't know, he has a regular podcast, he has a blog. You can go to his sites, you can view his information. It's very, very valuable. But what I wanted to ask, actually, what I wanted to do to start this off, Ryan, is find out, just talk a little bit about more about you and your background. Can you tell us, what inspired you to go into the military? What made you go through the transitions you did, and then eventually get into the personal finance space?
Yeah. I guess every story is unique, right? So,
Yeah.
joining the military, everybody's got their reason. Mine was really adventure. So I was a good student in high school, went off to college, and I did a year there and had all the good grades and all that, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just started thinking about what can I do that would give me an adventure, give me something different, and maybe kind of steer me a little bit in some way. And my dad suggested I go work on a dude ranch for a year, or teach whitewater rafting, or go do that kind of a thing. And my brother had actually joined the Marine Corps a few years earlier, and he did his 20. Good for him. I couldn't stick through and do that, not on active duty anyway. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized I wanted to do something a little different. So I joined the Air Force, signed for 6 years, and ended up doing 6.5 because I extended to do an extra deployment because our unit was low on people. But it was great. I saw the world. I got my college degree while I was in. And I mean, when I say the world, 5 continents, 30 something countries, got my degree while I was in. I really got to see and do so many things. And then at the end of my term, I really didn't want to keep working the same hours and shifts and deployment schedules I was doing, 5 deployments in 6 years, plus additional TDYs, a special duty assignment. I was just always gone. So for me, it was time to get out. I got out, and then I realized that I did not know anything about being an adult in the civilian world. So the military has a great healthcare plan, great life insurance, great retirement plan, but you have a very basic choice. They're great quality, but it's made as simple as it can so they can keep you in the fight and keep you ready to go. When you get out in the civilian world, you have, you go to your employer. If they have health insurance, they probably have 5 different options, and they might offer life insurance, but it's a small amount and it's tied to your job. So you should get something else. I got married right after I got out, and I just realized there was this whole world of financial topics that I didn't know. So I started reading everything I could. And this was in 2006, back when blogs were very new. And I realized that there were just regular people like you and me who were writing about personal finance, and I was just a nerd and reading everything I could. So I found some of those old blogs, and one of my friends, a good friend now, but at the time he had a guide on how to create a blog. So you go to this website and you buy a domain name and you put WordPress on it, and you do it with these folders, and you put a theme on there. And like, it was step by step. So I printed it out, and it took me like 4 hours to do this. And now you can have a blog up and running in 10 minutes.
Right, right.
This was early 2007 when I started the website.
Okay.
And I've been blogging ever since. The first site I did was Cash Money Life. And I had a few financial articles on that website, and then a few military articles. And I realized the military ones needed to be on their own site. So that's how I started the military wallet. But it started as a hobby and a way to keep myself accountable, to learn different things and share them. It was very social back then. Blogging, it was a very small community, so people would share. They would share each other's posts, and we had a little forum that we kept in touch with. This was before Facebook was what it is now, and Facebook groups didn't exist. So yeah, that's how I got started, and I've been doing it ever since on both sites, and I've been doing it full time now for about 10 years. So this is my job, but it's also it's something I'm passionate about. So it's a lot of fun. It's been a great adventure. I guess I should mention I got out of the military in 2006. And then in 2014, I joined the Air National Guard. So there was this huge gap in between. But I found out that when I was serving, I guess when I was serving, but when I was doing this full time, I didn't have a community that I was a part of outside of other bloggers, but I missed that interaction with real people, people you meet and hang out with and be together on a daily basis. But more than that, I missed being part of something that was bigger than myself. So after a lot of thought and prayer, talking with my wife, I went back and joined the Air National Guard. And I've been doing it for 6 years, got a commission a few years ago, and I've got 13 years in now, so I got about 7 left before I'm eligible to retire. So hopefully,
That's great.
we'll make it there.
Yeah. Congratulations. That's actually great.
We're working on it.
You mentioning that though is interesting, because I remember listening to one of your podcasts where you talked about coming out of active duty military, you like you were saying right now, you felt a little bit like you're alone.
Yeah.
But you still made, you still were very successful, even though you felt alone at the time, and you tapped into some resources that were available to you, and created some opportunities for yourself as well that enabled you to grow your business, and eventually you went back into the Air National Guard. But what would you say if you had a piece of advice to someone, either somebody maybe who's leaving the military, or even people who are not military, but maybe in this era of COVID, they lost their job. Maybe they had to do a job transition, or they're getting severance. They're leaving a certain career path. Is there anything that you would say that you tapped into the time when you were doing that transition was a little tough, a little bit scary, even what's something that you maybe could share with them that would be something that really was a source of strength for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Transitioning out of the military was difficult for me, and it's difficult for a lot of veterans for a lot of different reasons. There were a few things I did that were really helpful leading up to the transition. Like I said, I had 5 deployments in 6 years and a lot of other travel and temporary duty assignments. So one thing I was able to do was save up enough money that when I got out of the military, I was able to collect unemployment benefits, but I also had some savings that helped me. So one thing I tell everybody is always work on having some emergency fund savings, because a layoff can happen at any time. Nobody expected COVID to happen. Even when there were whispers in December about some new flu that was coming out, nobody anticipated 2020 being like it is. and the job losses or the times of unemployment. So, the emergency fund, you hear about it all the time. If you can have some savings that will last you up to a couple months, that is so massive because it allows you to weather any kind of major life change. And that's what it was for me. I had that money set aside, and I was actually okay. So
Yes.
that was one of the good things I did. The biggest transition I had that was difficult was going from, in the military, I was an E5, so a mid-level non-commissioned officer. So I was in charge of running my shift of 3 to 5 guys, and we'd go out there and I would assign them these jobs, and I'd get this and I'd make sure this happened. And I was checking up on things, and it went from that to zero. Right. I had no
You're
more
right.
responsibility. I was no longer in charge of folks or making sure this happened. And that was tough. You've got this job, this mission, this role. And then when you go down to no longer having that, you have to find ways to adjust. And that I struggled with that. And if were to do it again, I would go join local community groups, or I would do something online, or I'd reach out to other people. I would just be a lot more proactive. But for me, it was, the internet is not what it is now. So there weren't
Right.
online communities.
Right.
And I relocated halfway across the states. It went from Texas to Ohio. So I didn't know many
Wow.
people where I went. So there were a lot of transitions happening at once. It was difficult for me, but those are the things I would do. I'd be more active, whether it's in church or sports or community activities, volunteering, anything that you can
Helps.
do. Yeah, anything. So just stay tapped in. Really try to don't let things get you down, because it's really easy.
Sure.
That's where I would focus.
Well, one of the things you mentioned was, the emergency fund,
Yeah,
and I couldn't agree with you more. Like for a lot of the people that I work with, I've always said, hey, having that emergency fund is one of your most important things. In some cases, maybe even more important than paying off all of your debt right away,
yeah,
because if you get into a bad situation, as long as you can keep making those minimum payments on your debt, you're okay.
yes.
Whereas if you can't, um, so my question, actually, a little follow-on question, Ryan, would be, today, you're not getting anything when you put your money in a savings account. And a lot of people are, they're like, well, I hate having to have so much money in my savings account because, as prices go up, it just purchasing power kind of gets diluted. And,
Mhm.
what are other ways, either for military or even for non-military, that they might be able to save where it could get a little bit more? Are there any, where they're not taking on a lot of risk?
Well, I mean,
Um,
that's the age old question, right? So
yeah,
it's you got that inverse equation between risk and return,
yeah,
and I just leave it in savings.
okay,
I don't look at it as, do I need to get wealthy from this money? This money it serves to be peace of mind. So
okay,
I had enough money that I was unemployed for 6 months. Now, this was before I had a family and before I had a lot of other needs. I had a small car payment. I think the payment was $150. It was actually a new car, but I put down a trade, and then 2/3 of the price. Basically with the trade and my down payment was 2/3 of the deal. So between my cell phone, my car insurance, and my car, I was paying $250 a month. It was not much. So
right,
um, keep your expenses low as you can, so that if something happens, then your emergency fund will go a lot further. But in terms of where to put it, I keep my emergency fund in a savings account. Find an online savings account. You'll typically find better returns there. Ally Bank, CIT Bank, American Express Savings. Those are three national online banks that typically have really good rates. You'll find others. Just go to a bankrate.com or depositaccounts.com. A lot of them will show the best rates in the country.
okay,
Find one of
okay,
those, park it there. If you have taxable investments, if you need to tap into those, you can. If you're looking for more yield on your return, but that's volatile, and I wouldn't put an emergency fund there. But
right,
it's one of those things that if you absolutely need to tap into it, you could.
right,
Beyond that, I just keep it in savings.
okay. And what would you say? What is something that you see as being kind of a common problem or a common challenge when you have guests come to your blog or come to your site? What is some stuff that you see that they have as a common thread of financial challenge that you are able to answer, or that somebody can help?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it really depends on who's coming. So,
Okay.
you can look at it in terms of younger service members, for example, are more likely to have student loan debt or credit card debt, whereas somebody who's getting closer to retirement might be looking at how can I save for retirement, or will I be ready, or they're saving for college for their kids. And then in between, you got people saving for a house and other big expenses or purchases or getting married, and so it really depends on your demographic. But
Okay.
I would say common threads are probably the two biggest threads are debt, whether it's student loan or credit card or other consumer debt, and then the other one would be retirement planning. So I would say those are the two most common. Um, in terms of like how do you handle those, it's really case specific. If you have a more specific example, we can like dive into a little mini case
Sure.
study. But
Yeah.
yeah, it really just depends.
Depends on the person. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the person, the situation.
Yeah. Something else though too I've noticed is that you do give a lot of really great information on the military wallet specifically about, for military about, hey, these are uh, like we have Veterans Day coming up,
Yeah,
and you're like, hey, you get all these great deals. And a lot of veterans and active military are familiar with some of the deals already. Some of them, like, we all know that you can go to Chili's and get a free appetizer, or you can get some nice benefits from some of these restaurants. But you bring up a lot of really good points on your blog where it's like, wow, I didn't realize Dell computer is going to give me 15% off a purchase, or I'm going to be able to get a great deal on a vacation if I want to go somewhere, if I'm able to use places that offer deals for veterans and military. So I really I want to say that it's not really so much a question as it is a comment. I really like the fact that you have that information on there, because people can go on there all the time, find the information, and the links are there, and it's like it's very, very easy to use and very, very valuable. So, a pitch really for Ryan's, like, and just for those who may be joining us, or just now, this Ryan Guina, he and I here are talking. He is the founder of Cash Money Life and the Military Wallet. If you want to go to the militarywallet.com, you can find a lot of really valuable information there, and encourage your friends, family, anyone that that might be able to benefit from this to check it out, because I can tell you firsthand, I've gotten a lot of benefit from it. And he does a lot of work and puts a lot of effort into producing a very, very valuable website. So, getting to my next question, though, Ryan, and that is the the thing that I've found, at least personally, is it seems like in the military, a lot of and we had touched on this just very briefly before. A lot of people get, a lot of military service members, they get an answer, right? When you're in the service, everything is very structured, and so you have life insurance, and it's one option, right? SGLI, and you
yeah,
have your retirement plan, and it's the TSP, and you have all these things that are kind of set up for you, designed in a way to make it easy. Um, is when you transition out of the military into the civilian life, or even for those who are not military, and maybe that are moving from one job to another, or they're going through transition. Are there any tools, or are there any recommendations that you have for keeping the process when you move from essentially one system to another, for keeping that simple, or not getting overwhelmed by those changes? Is that clear, or do you
yeah.
want me
No, it
to?
is,
Okay.
and it's a great. That's a great question. Thank you for all your kind words prior to this, though. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
um, the biggest thing that I've learned with making these major decisions is to first eliminate that's not going to solve your problem. So what I'll do, I'm also a big spreadsheet nerd. So I model things out, and by model I just mean put things out. Like when I became self-employed, I no longer had access to a health insurance plan, so I had to go out. I should say group health insurance. So I was out of the military. I had left my day job, so I had to go find private health insurance, and that, if you've ever tried, is a pain, a royal pain.
Right.
And so I went out and I found the 10 to 12 different companies that were out there. And I just put, here's what it is. Here's the price. Here's the per month. Here's your max out of pocket. And I just put out those little numbers so that you can see it all in one place and compare it easily. So I'm real big on just putting things out and so you can easily see. But then I would also just eliminate anything that doesn't apply or is not going to be a good solution. Just starting by elimination, you can often cut out the vast majority of your options. So then it makes your job a lot easier. Certain things, like if you're changing companies and you've got a 401k plan, if there's nothing wrong with the new 401k plan, just take your old one and automatically roll it into your new one so that you don't have to manage two different buckets of money, or four or six or however many old plans you have. When you roll it in, it just makes your management and oversight so much easier. And then you don't have to worry about passwords or logins, or especially when you get into retirement, getting checks from a whole bunch of different places. Just anything you can do to really simplify things. Financially, account consolidation is great. Every couple of years, I'll open a few accounts to get a credit card bonus or a bank sign up bonus. And then some of them are worth a lot of money. A couple $100 open an account sounds great until you
Right.
realize you got 5 or 6 bank accounts that with, a few $100s in them, they're not doing anything. So every once in a while I'll go through and I'll clean those up. I'll close them out. I'll transfer the money into one main account that I use. So yeah, those are the things. Consolidate accounts, try to keep things as simple as possible. And when you have big choices and decisions to make, start by eliminating and then work backward from there. Like, figure out what your needs are. If these don't meet your needs, eliminate them immediately and then go from there. It just makes your job a lot easier.
So you would encourage, you mentioned, taking your 401k and rolling it over into your
Mhm.
new one. Um, I guess that would also include maybe rolling it into like an IRA as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay,
it's all case specific, right? So if
sure.
I move to a company that's got a terrible 401k plan,
Right,
really high fees on the funds and then management fees, and it might not make sense to take my old 401k and move it in, especially if it has really low fees and great accounts, index funds that are low cost. Then I might not do that. So there's always going to be a situation where it won't make sense. But like you said, you can move it into an IRA and you can avoid all those high fees by putting into a low cost index fund somewhere. And you're avoiding those because when you leave a company, sometimes they'll charge you additional fees to keep your 401k open because you're no longer employed there. So
right.
yeah, absolutely. Putting it into an IRA would be a great way. And if you have multiple IRAs, it might make sense to consolidate those as well so that you've got them all under one roof. You can more easily manage them, and asset allocation and rebalancing becomes so much easier to manage. So yeah,
Yes.
those are all great, great ideas.
Do you, Ryan, do you recommend that, you know, your viewers, people that follow you, that they actually get financial advisors, or that they do the work, they kind of learn it and they do it on their own? Because there's
Yeah.
advantages and disadvantages to both. And I know it is a case by case basis, but
Yep.
I'm curious what the preponderance of your viewers need, or what you found.
Great question. I encourage people to try it on their own first, just so
Okay.
you understand, because the more informed you are as a consumer, the better consumer you're going to be. My first experience going to a financial planner, it was one of those big box retailers. I won't say the name, but the guy held up a sheet of paper. I don't have a sheet of paper on my desk that would work, but I asked him, I explained, I'm in the military, I'm using the thrift savings plan and I'm maxing out my IRA. Should I increase my TSP contributions, or should I save for something else? And he said, I'll tell you what. He reaches into his drawer, pulls out a piece of paper, slides it to me, taps it, and says, that right there is what you need to sign up for. That right there. I'm like, well, what is it? And he goes, well, everybody in your situation, that's what I'm going to do. Tell you, you got to do this right here, because this here prospectus will tell you everything you need to know. And it wasn't a prospectus. It was a one-page sheet of paper, but essentially what it was a large cap, kind of similar to a S&P 500 fund, but it had close to 2% fees, surrender fees that were crazy. And he was just telling me, just give my secretary a cancel check on the way out. We'll set it up, allotment right from your bank account every month. And then he handed me a stack of business cards, told me to take it back to the base and pass them out. So I
Right.
dumped them in the trash can on the way out. Not his, but in the ashtray outside, the the
Right,
truck that had
right,
those
right,
ashtrays on the top. I put them all in there
right.
and smeared them around a little bit. So, um,
I think it was interviewed by the same guy.
same guy probably was.
Right.
Um, anyway, that was my first experience, and that led me to doing my own research and realizing that okay, well, that was actually my second experience. The first experience, I didn't know anything, and I ended up buying one of those front-loaded large cap funds, and it
Right.
ended up it was an expensive mistake, but it was a valuable lesson. So I ended up pulling that stuff out. Those funds had been sitting in there for a while. This time I went to that other big box retailer, and he encouraged me, in not so many words, to go do my own research. And
Right.
when I did that, I learned about companies like Fidelity and Vanguard and Schwab and those companies that have these really big, low cost index funds where you can go invest and match the market, and you're going to be better off than a lot of these actively managed funds that are charging you 1.5 to 2%. Now that those rates have come down a lot since this was the early 2000s, but that's what I did. I went and opened an account with one of those big firms. I just did, an index fund like Total Market or S&P 500, and that was great. That's what I needed to do. That's the experience I needed. But I don't want people to make that mistake and sign up for that person and then realize $100,000 down the drain later that they could have done it on their own and had better results. Now, there are people who need financial planners, 100%, but there are some that give the financial planning industry a bad name, and I want to equip people to know the difference so they know how to interview the person, they know what they're looking for, and they know the help they need. Some people don't want
Right.
to be bothered, but they should at least know the basics. And
Right.
if I can help people do the basics, some people are still going to sign up for a financial planner. That's wonderful. If that's what makes them sleep well at night, that's great.
Yep.
Many people should be able to do it themselves if they have a simple plan, or maybe they just need to consult every once in a while. Maybe it's for tax planning or retirement planning or something big. Hire somebody. There are a
Yep.
lot of experts, and I'm not an expert at everything. I have no problem hiring somebody to help me make those big decisions. I just
Yeah.
want to know what I'm getting into when I do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good, actually, a really good testament to, whether or not you want, to hire a financial advisor, because in a lot of cases, like you said, if your plan is simple enough, you can learn it and do it on your own.
Yeah,
But then you also need to know yourself too. And I know, like for instance, even though I'm in a position of being an expert in personal finance, I still get help in certain areas. I still get coached. I don't think it's something that like I don't think it's something that is not valuable at all. But it depends on who you are and what you need in a
absolutely.
particular area. Yeah, and then if it's worth it, it's absolutely worth it. Because in fact, I had a good friend who really enjoyed investing, but he said, I can't like get past myself when I see the market being very volatile. I tend to go with my emotions, and having someone there to encourage him to stay the course was worth the money to him, just to keep him
Absolutely.
on track.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
this spring was a huge example of that when the
yeah,
markets cratered,
yeah,
and now they're still they're up on the year like 7%, I think,
right,
S&P 500. So, but at one point it was down 30 something. It's just
right, right.
this year has been a tremendous example of, like, can you withstand that? And if you can't, then maybe hiring somebody to help you is the right option. Just know who you're hiring, why you're hiring, and how they're being paid and what their fees are, and just
Yep.
understand. Be an informed
Is
consumer.
yeah, exactly.
That's
Being an
what it's
informed
about.
consumer and transparency is
Yep.
critical. Yeah, because when a lot of I know that a lot of financial advisors will tack the fees on, and people don't even know what they're getting involved in.
Hmm.
Because they don't necessarily want to know. They want it to be kind of a set it and forget it,
Yep.
and somebody else is taking care of this for me. Um, so yeah, that's a really good point, Graham. So Ryan, like, tell me a little bit more about where you want to go with cash money life in the military wallet. Like in the future, what are you looking at delving into more? Is it going to be kind of just keeping everyone updated on what's going on, or is there a particular direction you want to take, your business and helping your audience and
Yeah.
potentially my audience that wants to join you too?
Great question.
Okay.
Military wallets where I'm putting most of my focus and energy right now, and
Okay.
we just released a rebranding on the website, and it looks tremendous compared to what it was. So it looks really good. It's got a great
Okay.
new logo. The website is much more user friendly. The layout and design, especially on mobile, it looks great. So that's part of the what we're doing, and I'm talking business side real fast because that's
Sure.
interesting to some people. Um, so on the business side, I've hired an editorial content manager. We've got a few writers now, and prior to this year, I was doing the vast majority of it myself, and I was kind of reaching burnout in terms of trying to write so much for both of my sites and then manage the advertising and all of that, the business related stuff that needs to be done. So we've done that, and actually prior to this, I had a call with a social media manager. We're bringing her on, so we're trying to really grow the sites in terms of bringing on a lot more content and trying to engage with people and really build it into more of a publishing business instead of a quote unquote blog. Um, but yeah, what are we going to do? So the military wallet, my goal is to turn it into the biggest website for military benefits and financial info. So there are
Okay.
a few of them out there. And then there are other news sites like you have Military Times, for example, or military.com, and they talk about military benefits, but they also talk about what's happening in the various branches and the different news and those kinds of things. I'm not going to get into news. That's not my gig, but I want the military wallet to be that big brand that is synonymous with a Military Times or military.com. So
Yes.
when people think about, well, where do you get your military benefits information? Go to the military wallet. So
Yes.
that's what we're working on. And so it's going to take a few more years, I think, but
Sure.
that's okay.
That's
I'm in this
great.
for the long haul. So that's
Yeah.
that's the big goal. Cash Money Life. We're just humming along. We're just writing about good financial saving, investing, money management, but I wouldn't say we have the same defined audience that we have like with the
With
military
military
wallet.
wallet.
So it
Okay.
gives us a little more in many ways freedom with the military wallet because I know exactly who we're talking to and we can really zero in on that. And that's actually really powerful. So I enjoy that.
Okay.
Yep.
What do you think is something that for non-military, our audience is obviously a bit more diverse,
Sure.
but for non-military, what do you think is uh, probably one of the biggest challenges for them? Like I know we talked a little bit about military service
Mhm.
members and their challenges, but if you were talking to maybe a group that's a little bit younger, what's something that you would recommend to them as if they're just starting out? What should they focus on first? Let's say they don't necessarily have any savings. They may not necessarily have very much debt. They might have some student loan debt,
Yep.
but what in your view is the smartest thing to really start focusing on? If maybe they're wanting to start a family, or that might be a young couple. Um, what do you think is the best thing to focus on? Should they be saving? Should they be buying a house? Should they uh, be focusing on retirement? What do you think is the most important?
Yes, no, yes. So yes to
Okay.
saving, no to buying a house, and then yes for retirement. And here's why for all of those. Um,
Okay.
So honestly, military members and non-military members have a lot of the same issues, right? So if I'm young in the military or if I'm young out of the military, our needs are going to be very similar. So the number one thing I think too many people try to do when they first launch into their own adult lives is they try to recreate the livelihood that the lifestyle their parents have. And their parents, it took them 20, 30 years to get there, or however long it took them, right? So it's easy to go from this nice big house with all this nice furniture and uh, this nice neighborhood and try to recreate that and say, well, this is what I'm used to. This is where I need to live. This is how I need to live. But you don't see how they were when they were your age, right? So when I first launched, I lived in the barracks on base, so that was easy. But then I got my first apartment, and like, well, I got to go buy furniture. So instead of buying $5,000 worth of furniture to fill an apartment, which is easy to do, right? I went out and bought a futon, a TV stand, and a folding table, right? And that was it. So I had my couch, I had a TV, and I had a folding table and some folding chairs. And almost 20 years later, I still have that folding table and folding chairs. But now
Right.
they're in our attic. We pull them out when we have guests over, if we're playing games or something. But
Sure.
it's live the life you can afford, save a lot. You need that emergency fund, and then you increase your standard of living as you can. So it was easy for me. I was single, so like I said, I had a futon, a TV table, and then eventually after, a few months or a year, I saved up, I bought a bed. I didn't even buy a bed frame. It was just on the metal rails that you get with the box springs.
Right.
Um, but that was it. I bought a secondhand table from a guy on base for $10, and but that's how I did it. You bought used furniture, and then I saved my money. And then when I got out, I got rid of all that furniture. I ended up moving halfway across, the states. So it was easy for me to get rid of all that stuff without owing money on credit cards still, and thinking I'm tied to it. So I gave it
Right.
away or sold it really cheap. And then I moved, and then was able to kind of step up and get things a little nicer. My wife and I were married for 10 years before we actually a little longer before we bought a really nice bedroom suite. And it's not that we couldn't afford it. It's that we knew we were going to move, or this was happening, or it just wasn't a priority. So I guess the biggest things are save your money, have your emergency fund, and then slowly increase your standard of living. As you get pay raises, save a little bit of it, and then loosen the purse strings, and then spend money a little bit more as you go. As long as you maintain a delta, a gap between your income and your expenses, you're always going to be fine. It doesn't matter how much you make. As long as you're saving something, you're going to be fine. That's the biggest thing I see people do. One of the biggest things, trying to have that standard of life before they're ready. And once you dig a hole of debt, it's really hard to get out
Really
of
hard
there.
to get out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like Ephraim had a comment here. He said he definitely agrees to many young people don't understand the value of starting small and staying nimble when it comes to purchases. So Ephraim, thanks for that comment. Yeah.
Great comment.
I yeah. When you talk about this stuff, Ryan, it makes me think a lot about so when I was in the service, what I would say to Marines that I had who, when we would talk about personal finance or we talk about, say, saving for retirement, I would say to them, okay, you have a certain amount that's going into your TSP by allotment every month. Why don't you make it a goal that every time you get a raise, just take that amount of that raise, just put it in there, add that to your allotment, so that it's just going in there and you aren't even seeing the money. So you get the raise, you're getting the raise, but it's going into your retirement. So it's boosting that retirement savings because you can look and say, hey, last year I lived on this amount of money. I can do the same thing this year. And so I can take that raise and automatically. And so that was one example of a technique that
Yeah.
I encouraged them to do, which was useful to some of them that did it, the number of them that actually agreed to do that. What were there any, or are there any techniques that you would encourage young people to use similar to that? Are there any things that you've found that are useful
Yeah.
to increase that savings without it being a big change to their lifestyle?
Yeah. So the example you gave is one I've heard before. I've also heard people say in the military. So in the civilian world, you don't have the same pay scales. In the military, it's regimented by your pay grade and years of service. So in the military, one example was live 2 pay grades under where you are right now. So that every time you get a promotion, you can still start increasing your spending, but your budget says this is how much we can spend. The difference is what we keep. So yeah, you can do what you mentioned, that other, and I can't take credit. I think that was Doug Nordman's book. I think I read that. If it wasn't, it was another military blogger. I don't remember whom. But yeah, you can do that. You can set it. Some 401k plans, the employers allow you to automatically increase your savings 1% each year. So that's something you can do. It's tough to automatically put 100% of your new pay raise into savings. Like, it doesn't always work.
Right,
Inflation is real. So
right,
you do have to account for that. But if there's a way you can do it, maybe you increase it 1% or half of your pay raise. The key, though, is to be conscious of it. Know what you're earning and know what you're spending. And if you get an increase in your income, if you can afford to keep living where you are, that's fine. But if you're like I was, and my first set of dresser, was these Rubbermaid 3-drawer things. Again, this was just me working my way into living as an adult on my own, instead of going spending $5,000 of money on furniture. I went inexpensively so that I could have my money to do more important things. And that gave me that money so that when I separated from the military, I was okay. I wasn't beholden to these big credit card debts, and I had that cash that
right.
I was unemployed for 6 months. It's not fun. not just the financial reasons, that, like I said earlier, the emotional reasons. But
Yeah.
you don't want to be making $100,000 a year and living, sleeping on a futon and having plastic dresser drawers and eating off of a folding table, right? So, it,
Right.
and those things were fine when I mean, my base pay was $2,000 a month, so I wasn't making a lot of money.
Right.
So that was fine for the first few months, but eventually you're going to want to increase your standard of living. So it's completely okay. Look, money's to be spent. Just do it consciously. Be an informed consumer and be cognizant of, are you saving for retirement? Are you saving for an emergency fund? And if you're doing those things, then yeah, learn to spend a little, because you have to have a good quality of life.
I like what you say about being an informed consumer. That's a
Yeah.
great statement because it's hard to do sometimes. You fall into a state of complacency, and you, this question, Ryan, is more, I guess, psychological, and that is, you have someone who really wants to save and be responsible with their money, but they just have this association with spending money, or it's difficult for them to actually do what it is that you're telling them to do. What are some techniques that you use or that you recommend to help someone to actually motivate them to do what they know they need to do? We can give everybody all the greatest tips in the world, but they don't actually do it, then obviously it's not going to be useful.
Yeah.
I know this is the age-old question, but has there been anything that you've found that has been useful for people to hear and say, okay, I can do this. I can motivate myself if I use Ryan's recommendations to really make me do what I know I'm supposed to do?
Yeah. It's funny because for me with money, that's not an issue, but with other aspects of my life, it is, whether that's
Yes.
working out or, different things on my business, for example. But I have two friends who actually used accountability partners. One used his spouse, and because they both were having some money spending issues, but then they had a regular meeting once a week where they would sit down and look. It was informal. It could be a 10-minute meeting, or it could be 15, or they could go really in depth. It could be 2 minutes if they needed to. But it was okay. What are we spending on? Do we have any big purchases? Um, One of the things, like when my wife and I first got married, we had a little rule: if it was over $100, we'd talk about it first. And
Okay.
that works because it makes you think twice about, well, do I need to go splurge on this? And sometimes if it in another one would be sleep on it overnight. Like if it's an impulse purchase or a major purchase, instead of doing it right then, you sleep on it overnight or give yourself a week or whatever it might be. Accountability partners are good. That's what helps me with my business. I have some friends that I regularly talk with. Sometimes that's more difficult with finances because people don't want to
Share
open
that. Yeah.
open their books, or they're nervous about it. Good friend of mine had spending problems, and he actually, his dad lived next door, so he had his dad actually help him with accountability. And how hard is that to show your books to your dad? But
Right.
like, many people don't want to do that, but I commend him, because how difficult is it, first of all, to admit that you have an issue, but then second of all, take that step. And he did. So, kudos to him. And it helped him so much to turn around where he was. He was digging himself into debt, and it took him about a good year to really get himself out of it. But wow, it was such a huge change. And you could see it when you talk to him. Like, he just felt lighter, and
Right.
debt is a heavy burden. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a problem to tackle. So accountability partners are good. And then give yourself little rules. Like for us, if it's a purchase over X amount, or if it's an impulse purchase, then we talk about it, or we wait a few days, or whatever it is, or we schedule it out for a few months later. And then if it's still necessary, we do it. Doesn't count for emergencies, but it does for, like I said, impulse purchases or things like that. So those are a
Okay.
few tips, but by all means, they're not all of them.
Yeah, yeah. I like what you mentioned though about you're like, hey, I have things that hold me back. Like you had mentioned, hey, you have a business accountability partner,
Yeah.
and I would say maybe for some of the small business owners that are watching, um, what is something that you do with business accountability that helps you?
Yeah, masterminds are great for business, but I don't know about personal finances. But yeah, anytime you can, just have a second second opinion or somebody that
Okay.
you trust. Any kind of trusted counsel is good. And it
Okay.
can be anything. Buying a house, like if it's a major purchase and you don't know, buying a car, buying a house, going to college, those are things we don't do every day.
Right.
So in the case of those types of situations, definitely reach out to your peers and your community and ask. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. I'm going to turn that off. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Um, but yeah, ask people who have experience, like, okay, you've just bought a house. Who did you use as your lender? Ask for recommendations, or, go on Facebook and ask, hey, we're looking at doing this. Does anybody have experience with XYZ? And just really get as much information as you can, because the better informed you are, the better decisions you're going to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, from my own perspective, I remember when I did my first home purchase, you mentioning, doing a home purchase or making a big investment. I remember very specifically thinking, it's a big kind of a big leap of faith. You're making a big commitment to
Yeah.
something, and you want to definitely go and get as much information as you can, and don't ever feel rushed to do something. Don't ever feel rushed to make, like, if you ever feel pressured into doing something, take a step back, take a deep breath, and ask yourself. This is something that I've always kind of taken on board myself, and ask yourself, hey, is this a decision that needs to be made right now? And if it's not real time sensitive, then you can take time and really learn as much as you want about something before you have to do it. But if it's but the flip side being, you don't also want to be, suffering from, paralysis by analysis, where you're
Yeah.
just constantly, thinking about it. So just having a good balance, I think, is important. But that's definitely a great point you bring up.
Yeah. And another good rule is never go to a car dealership with the intent to just look. Um,
Right.
I can't tell you how many friends I have that said, "Yeah, man, we just wanted to see what was new," and then they drove off with something.
Right.
So
Right.
anytime I rarely go to car. I mean, we've had one of our cars for 10 years. The last one I replaced it 3 years ago, but I had it for 11 years before that. So I just drive them into the ground.
Right. Right.
But if I go to a car dealership, I will tell the salesman up front, I said, I'm not buying today, but I'm doing research. And most of them are very respectful of that once you tell them that. But that is actually a good rule to live by, because I've known so many people like, yeah, I took my car to get the oil changed and I drove off with a new car.
With a new car. Yeah. Hey,
It's
that's a
oil
great line.
change.
I'm not here to buy. I'm not going to buy today. I'm here to do research. That's
Yeah.
great.
I've used it a lot, and
Yeah.
the dealers or the salesmen actually appreciate that, because then they don't feel like they have to show you 20 cars, and it takes
Right.
pressure off them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's less work for them too.
yeah, but I'll also say, but give me a card, because when I come back, I will ask for you.
Yeah.
So that really gives them the incentive to really play ball with you on your terms, because they do want to earn that sale, but they're not going to try to force it that day. So it makes things a little easier. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my personal tip.
That's good. Hey, these are good tips for helping the young people not, get, I don't want to say get taken advantage of, but ultimately that kind of is what's going on. Uh,
Yeah, it's an expensive lesson.
yeah, yeah. Uh, and you had mentioned earlier, when you're starting out, hey, you want to save in your emergency fund. You don't want to necessarily buy a house right away, but you do want to be saving for retirement. What's, aside from the 401k method of saving, what would you recommend for a family or a young people that are just starting out and wanting to save? Where do you recommend they go? Do they go to like Vanguard and Fidelity and they just open an account there and put their money in the lowest cost index funds, or is there some particular strategy that you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So, Vanguard and Fidelity, you can never go wrong with those companies. Schwab is another one that I think is very reputable, and they have a lot of great low cost funds. Where and how you should invest is very personal. So I don't want to give in specific recommendations, but what I do say is try to stick to low cost index funds, because they're generally going to match the market, and you're probably not going to lose as much as you might for some of those funds that try to beat the market, because those can be a lot more volatile. They've got a lot higher expenses. Um, in addition to that, if you don't know how or where to start with investing, a simple target date fund can be a good way. As long as you get one that's relatively low cost, it's a good way to automate your investments without having to try to manage everything yourself. So they're not
Right.
always they're not always the lowest cost, but they are the simplest way to start. In
Does,
addition to the Vanguards and Fidelities and Schwabs of the world, you also have firms like Betterment, for example, and Wealthfront. Both of those are automated. They're called RoboAdvisors, and they will help what's it, your asset allocation. They'll automatically
right.
do your asset allocation for you. They're not for everybody. They're a little more high cost than if you were to do it yourself. And but for some people who don't know where to start or don't want to be bothered with it, it can be a more efficient method than paying somebody who's a financial advisor that might charge more. You're not getting that personal touch. So
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of that.
You mentioned that, the robo
Those
advisor. It's kind of interesting because it's like the target date funds and the robo advisor seems to be similar in some ways.
They are, yeah.
Because it's like that target date fund, it kind of slowly unwinds it for you as you get older. And the robo advisor, the way I understand it, is doing something very similar.
They do, yeah. Those are some of the options of where to go. And if you choose to use a financial advisor, they're going to have tips or places that they recommend. TD Ameritrade is one that a lot of financial advisors use. They were just, I think, purchased by Schwab though, so they should be merging
Okay.
pretty soon. The other thing, so you talked where to invest. Any of those firms are good firms. They're reputable. You'll be fine. There are dozens of other really good ones as well. I recommend people focus on making sure they're not paying really high expense ratios because it's not always necessary to get good returns. The investment vehicle, though, that's also important. So your 401k is a vehicle. It's a type of place where you can invest. IRAs are a good one for retirement, but not everybody needs to save or invest in retirement accounts because you're locking that money up for retirement. So if you're thinking, okay, my kid's college is coming up in 10 years, you can invest in a 529 plan or a Coverdell ESA educational savings account. Or if you're planning on buying a home and you don't think interest is going to work well enough, then you can put some of that into other types of investments, or you could have a taxable savings account where you hope the money will earn more than savings.
Right.
Just understand that if you're going to do that, it's a little more volatile, and you might want
Right.
to make sure your investment horizon is going to be at least 5 to 10 years. And then
Right.
if you get closer to that, you can start taking money from that and putting it into CDs or savings accounts where it'll be a little more stable. So you're ready to make your down payment on a house or that wedding or your 25th anniversary cruise around the world, whatever you're going to do. So really it's finding the investment goal that you have and then the right vehicle for it. And then within that vehicle, the right types of investments. So I guess there's a lot of nuance.
No, this is good. This is really good. Ephraim has another comment here, and actually, this relates back to we were talking about accountability partners. He says it's important to make sure you have the right accountability partners. I once brought a friend with me to help me look at cars and control my excitement and make sure I didn't overspend. And he actually helped talk me into buying because he fell in love with the car more than me.
It's always easier to spend somebody else's money.
Right. Yeah, Ephraim, thanks for sharing that. That's really good. It's a good point. But going back to what you were saying there, Ryan, about having the right investment vehicles and putting it in the right funds, and making sure you've got relatively low cost. I would say that my rule of thumb has always been, a a reasonable a reasonable low expense ratio or maintenance fee or whatever you want to call it for an ETF or a mutual fund. I say reasonable. I'm hitting a broad range. I'm saying it's probably going to be less than 0.5% a year. But I know even today that's considered expensive by a lot of people. But
It is.
I've seen that a lot of, especially the Vanguard funds, even the more esoteric ones, right? Like if you want to put your money into a fund in emerging markets, right?
Yep.
Even those funds have relatively low expense ratios. Like I think theirs is like a 0.1%,
Yep.
which again is higher than the TSP, but still pretty low. I mean,
Yeah, it's still very low in the grand scheme
yeah.
of things. Yeah.
So, what do you have a rule of thumb as far as how high is too high for an expense ratio, or is it all just situationally dependent?
So I think it really depends on where you are, right? So if you're in a 401k with your company, you don't have the choice, right? You can't go
Right.
shop around at a
Of
Vanguard,
course.
Fidelity, or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
So what you have is what you have. I would just shoot for whatever is going to get you the best broad market, lowest
Exposure.
cost, and go with that. You Fidelity now has some zero cost index funds. I think they might keep a little more toward cash. I'm not exactly sure how they're paying for those. Vanguard has a few that are as low as like 0.04%. I think. I'm not
Right.
sure exactly, but that's incredibly low. It's almost non-existent.
Right.
Um, TSP has some that are like 0.04, 0.05, I think. I haven't seen what it is in the last year, but they're very low. When you're that low, you're not going to save anything by hopping from one to the other. It's so minuscule. I think anything under like 0.2, 0.25 is still really low, especially if you're talking in a 401k or you're getting into more of those esoteric funds,
Niche.
or things
Yeah.
that are more niche. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, 0.25 or lower, you're really low. If it meets your needs, then go for it. Some robo advisors are in that range. So
Right.
you're really low at that point. When you start getting into 0.5, you're still relatively low. And if it meets your needs, you're absolutely fine. When you start getting above zero point 0.5, I think you start getting a little expensive, and there
Yeah.
has to be a very good reason to justify going into that range. I'm not saying
Right.
don't do it. What is
Right.
your reason? And
Right.
can you justify it? Don't look for a reason to do it. There has to be a reason that says you need this fund. This needs to be part of your portfolio. Here's why, and then you can say, okay, it makes sense.
Yes.
Once you start getting kind of in that 0.75 and higher, I don't always see the need to go into that, especially if you're paying an advisor on top of those funds, because a lot of those are coming with loads where they're recommended or they're commission based, and so you have to ask, why are we recommending
Are
that
we
fund?
doing
And
this?
get into
Yeah.
the why behind it. And is there a fund that's going to do something comparable at a lower cost? So I think those are broad based. I wouldn't call them hard rules of thumb because there's so many differences between I mean, there are
Right.
thousands of different ETFs and mutual funds. It, you can't really compare them all. So it's about
Right.
coming down to what you're comfortable with and is it a reasonable fee?
Okay. Well, let's see. I don't know that we have any more questions here. Got a lot of really good comments. But again, for those who are actually just tuning in now, uh, this is Ryan Guina. He's the founder of Cash Money Life and the Military Wallet. Very, very valuable sites, both of them. I've used them. I know a lot of my followers have used them as well. And I want to just make a pitch for Ryan and to definitely check out his sites. To learn more about him, you can go to themilitarywallet.com. You can find out more about not just him and what he does, but a lot of really great tips and techniques for saving money and improving your personal finances. Um, Ryan, did you have any other comments that you wanted to leave with the audience? I know we're kind of coming up on our time here, but I know you got to go. You're a busy guy. But is there any other comments that you wanted to share
No,
before?
no, I'm good. Just I appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope we were able to help some folks out. If you do want to reach out to me, just go to my website. There's contact forms on those sites. It'll email directly to me, and then I'll be happy to get back to you. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, yeah, and this is just again, Ryan, great to have you on the show, and hopefully we can have you back again soon because
Sounds
I
good.
know
Thank
everybody
you.
has really enjoyed this. So it's great talking to you, and to all the audience, thank you for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, Patrick.